The last text Arthur sent his wife was at 4:12 p.m. It contained exactly 6 words. She locked the front door from the inside. He did not call 911. He did not try to break a window. Investigators would spend 3 weeks trying to understand why a grown man holding a heavy steel wrench simply stood in the hallway and waited. When police finally entered the house on Springvale Drive 3 days later, the kitchen sink was perfectly fixed, but the floorboards had been bleached white. Arthur was a creature of habit. He liked things to make sense. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., he woke up, kissed his wife Mallory, and checked on his 2-week-old daughter. Just checking the locks. Can never be too careful. He was a plumber by trade, an independent contractor who prided himself on reliability and punctuality. On October 14th, his first call of the day was a residential job in a quiet, affluent suburb, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn was cut to the exact same height. The client had given her name as Sarah. When Arthur pulled his van into the driveway, the neighborhood was perfectly still. The sound of a sprinkler ticking 2 houses down, identical driveways, curtains that moved just a fraction as he walked up the path. "Morning, ma'am. Arthur's Plumbing. You called about a clogged drain?" Sarah opened the door. She looked like any other tired suburban mother. Pale skin, a slightly oversized sweater, her hair pulled back into a messy bun.
"Oh, thank you so much for coming at such short notice. Please, come in."
Arthur stepped inside, wiping his boots on the mat. The house was immaculate, almost uncomfortably clean. There was no clutter, no mail on the table, no shoes by the door. But beneath the heavy scent of cheap vanilla air fresheners, Arthur caught something else. Industrial bleach. And something sweet, like rotting fruit left in the sun. He filed it away. People used all sorts of harsh chemicals to clear bad clogs before giving up and calling a professional.
"My son is sleeping in his room down the hall. Can I ask you to try to keep it quiet?"
"Yes, of course. I'll do my best to keep the noise down." As Sarah gestured toward the kitchen, Arthur noticed her left hand. She was missing 2 fingers, the index and the middle. The skin around the stumps was heavily scarred, healed over but jagged. "Don't stare. It's rude. Just do the job." He looked away, focusing his attention down the hallway. There were 3 doors. The first one on the left caught his eye. It had a heavy industrial steel padlock on it. The padlock was on the outside of the door. Why would you lock a kid inside their room from the outside? He rationalized it quickly. Maybe it wasn't the kid's room. Maybe it was a basement door, locked to keep a wandering toddler from falling down the stairs. It was the kind of thing you explain away at the time. Arthur set his heavy toolbox down on the pristine kitchen tiles.
"Would you like a drink? A cold soda, or maybe just some ice water?"
"Ice water is fine, thank you." Sarah walked to the fridge. Arthur slid under the sink and clicked on his heavy-duty flashlight. The PVC pipes looked standard, but the P-trap was bulging slightly at the curve. He tapped it with the handle of his wrench. It sounded completely solid, packed tight.
"I think it got clogged when I dumped some leftovers down there. I wasn't thinking clearly."
She handed him a glass of ice water. Condensation dripped onto his knuckles. "No problem. I'll have to take the trap apart. Might get a little messy, but I've got towels." He placed a plastic bucket under the pipe and began to loosen the slip nuts. As the watertight seal broke, a rush of foul black sludge poured into the bucket. The smell hit him like a physical blow. It bypassed the vanilla freshener entirely. That isn't food waste. That smells like charred meat and wet hair. He reached into the pipe with his long-nosed pliers to pull out the main obstruction. It was a tangled, dense mess of thick, fibrous material. He wiped it off with a rag, holding it up to the flashlight beam. Shredded fabric. Looks like a piece of a heavy blue uniform, like a delivery driver's shirt. Intertwined with the fabric was a small, crushed cardboard box. He squinted at the faded, waterlogged letters. New Life Vision. Contact lenses. And something else. A small plastic rectangle, snapped cleanly in half. He rubbed the grime off with his thumb. It was an airline ticket stub. Flight 9K1114. Passenger name? Lionel Sinclair. Ma'am, there's some weird stuff down here. Looks like someone flushed a wallet or something. There was no answer. Arthur slid out from under the sink, wiping his brow. Sarah was standing directly behind him. She was always slightly too close. Not close enough to say something about, but close enough to make the hairs on the back of his neck stand up.
You like helping people, right? Isn't that why you decided to go for this job?
Yeah, I guess. Just paying the bills, keeping the lights on. Sarah's dark eyes dropped to his left hand, fixing on his gold wedding band.
I see that you're married. Any kids?
Yeah, just had a little girl recently.
2 weeks old, right? Congratulations. That's a beautiful age.
Arthur froze. The cold from the ice water glass seemed to seep into his bones. I didn't tell her that. I didn't mention the baby on the phone. He tried to remember if his company website had a personal bio. It didn't. He was strictly professional. How did you know she was 2 weeks old? Before Sarah could answer, a loud, violent thud echoed from the hallway. It came from the room with the padlock. What the hell was that? Another thud. Heavier this time. The door rattled violently in its frame, dust drifting down from the jamb. Then, a voice. Small, muffled, and strangely distorted, like it was echoing through a tin can.
Mommy? Can I have it?
Sarah didn't flinch. Her smile remained perfectly fixed, not reaching her eyes.
Honey, go back to bed.
Her tone was cold, completely devoid of any maternal warmth or concern.
Mommy, can I have it? I'll be good this time. Please. I'm so hungry.
Ma'am, I think your child needs something. He sounds hurt.
He'll get it in a bit. Sweetie, just be patient. I'll get it to you later. I promise.
The scratching started. Long, frantic scrapes against the inside of the solid wood door. That doesn't sound like a child's fingernails. That sounds like metal scraping on wood. Arthur's breathing went shallow. The wrongness of the house was suffocating him. He looked at the black sludge in the bucket, the shredded blue clothes, the ID card of a man named Lionel Sinclair. He made a decision that seemed entirely reasonable at the time. I need a different snake from the van. This clog is much deeper than I thought. He stood up, wiping his hands nervously on his jeans. He didn't pack his tools. He just wanted to get to the door.
You better go.
Her voice had dropped an octave. The polite suburban mother facade slipped, revealing something entirely hollow underneath. I'll be right back. 2 minutes. Arthur walked briskly down the hallway toward the front door, not looking back. He reached for the brass knob. He turned it. It didn't move. He looked at the deadbolt above the knob. It was a double-cylinder lock. It required a physical key from the inside to open. The key was not in the lock. She locked the front door. Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He pulled his phone from his pocket. His hands wouldn't work the way he needed them to. His thumbs fumbled over the screen. He opened his messages to Mallory. She locked the front door from the inside. He hit send. He didn't call 911. He was afraid making a sound would trigger whatever was about to happen. He slowly turned his head to look down the hallway. The heavy industrial padlock on the door was gone. The door was hanging open by an inch, revealing a sliver of pitch-black darkness. He had noticed the padlock earlier. He just hadn't known what it meant. It wasn't to keep a child safely inside. It was to keep Arthur out until it was time. Gripping his heavy steel wrench tightly, Arthur pushed the door open. There was no child's bed. There were no toys. There were no windows. The room was entirely empty, except for a heavy iron grate set into the center of the floor. A ventilation shaft leading down into the basement. The voice hadn't come from a child standing in the room. It had come from a cheap plastic speaker mounted above the grate. And the thuds? They were coming from below the grate. Arthur stepped closer. The smell of charred meat, bleach, and rot was overpowering here. It burned his eyes. He looked down into the suffocating darkness of the grate. A pale, slender face looked back up at him from the basement below. It was a man, emaciated, filthy, wearing the shredded, blood-stained remains of a blue delivery uniform. The man's eyes were wide with pure, unadulterated terror. They were the eyes of an animal caught in a trap for weeks. He opened his mouth, but no words came out, just a wet, rasping sound. His tongue had been completely removed. He raised a trembling hand toward the grate, reaching for Arthur. He was missing 2 fingers on his left hand. The exact same finger Sarah was missing. Oh my God. Arthur stumbled backward, his boots slipping on the polished wood floor. He bumped hard into the hallway wall, knocking a framed picture to the ground. He turned around, raising the wrench. Sarah was standing at the end of the hallway, blocking his exit. She was holding a sleek silver laptop in her remaining hand.
They're very excited to finally meet you, Arthur.
She turned the screen toward him. The brightness illuminated her pale face in the dim hall. It was a live video feed, a dark web chat room. The header read, "Those fine young gentlemen." The chat was scrolling incredibly fast, hundreds of anonymous users, all watching him. He looked up at the corner of the ceiling. A small red light blinked steadily from a hidden camera disguised as a smoke detector.
David didn't last very long. Lionel was a fighter, bless his heart. But you, Arthur, you have a brand new family to get back to.
They love watching the ones with hope. It makes the struggle so much sweeter.
Every piece had been there from the start. None of it had seemed connected. The knowledge of his daughter, the missing plumbers and delivery men on the local news, the padlock. She hadn't hired him to fix a sink. She had cast him in a snuff broadcast.
"Let me out, now! I won't say a word to anyone!"
He raised the heavy steel wrench, his knuckles turning white.
If you take a single step towards me, I won't hesitate. I've done it before. Done it plenty of times.
She reached behind her back and pulled out a long, serrated hunting knife. The blade was dull, stained with old, dried blood.
Isn't it a mother's job to provide for her family?
She gestured to the laptop. The chat room was exploding with text. The users weren't just watching. They were bidding cryptocurrency. Bidding on which part of Arthur she should cut first. Arthur realized with sickening clarity why he couldn't just attack her blindly. If he killed her, he would never find the key to the deadbolt. The windows in the living room were barred with thick wrought iron. He was trapped in a cage, and the audience was waiting for the show to begin. What investigators would later piece together was this. At 4:18 p.m., Arthur threw the heavy steel wrench, not at Sarah, but directly at the laptop in her hand. The screen shattered instantly. The live feed went dead. In that split second of distraction, Arthur tackled her to the floor. The struggle lasted less than 2 minutes, but it was brutal and clumsy.
Arthur managed to disarm her, pinning her wrist to the floorboards, but not before taking a deep, jagged slash to his left thigh. He found the deadbolt key attached to a dirty lanyard hidden under her sweater. Bleeding profusely, he unlocked the heavy front door and dragged himself onto the manicured front lawn, screaming for help. A neighbor walking a golden retriever heard the screams and immediately called 911. By the time the police breached the house 8 minutes later, Sarah was gone. She had slipped out through a hidden, soundproofed door in the basement, taking the emaciated man with her. The house, it turned out, belonged to a retired couple who were vacationing in Europe. Sarah had simply broken in, changed the locks, and staged it for the broadcast. She was never identified. Her real name and the name of the man in the basement remains unknown. The dark web server hosting those fine young gentlemen was wiped clean and destroyed before the FBI Cyber Division could trace a single IP address. Arthur survived his injuries after 2 surgeries and a month of physical therapy.
He still works as a plumber to support his wife and daughter. But he no longer accepts residential jobs in quiet suburbs. He requires every client to leave their front doors wide open while he works, no matter the weather. 6 months after the incident, Arthur walked to his mailbox and found an unmarked manila envelope inside. Inside was a single, glossy photograph. It was a picture of Arthur, sleeping soundly in his own bed, his wife beside him. The photo had been taken from inside his bedroom closet. The case is still listed as unsolved.